Hello, welcome everyone to Flyleaf Books event this evening. Thanks so much for joining us tonight to celebrate the release of local author Kate Rademacher's new book, Reclaiming Rest. I'm Maggie, the new events manager here at Flyleaf. Before we begin, if you have questions throughout the event, just put them in the chat on the side or in the Q&A, ask a question part, and we'll come to them towards the end of the evening. You can find out about all of our virtual events by clicking on the link at the top of the screen. And if you'd like to make a donation to Flyleaf to help us continue to bring great programs like these to you in the future, please click the donate button below our faces. If you'd like to support Flyleaf with tonight's author, we have copies of Reclaiming Rest that are available for purchase. Just click on the green button at the bottom of the page to order your copy. You can also call Flyleaf to order over the phone, or if you're local to Chapel Hill, come visit us and shop our shelves. We're now open 7 days a week. And although we are closed this holiday weekend on the 4th and 5th of July. So now I'd like to welcome our guest for tonight's event. Kate Rademacher grew up outside of Boston and now lives in Chapel Hill with her family. She's a graduate of Wesleyan University in Connecticut and the Gilling School of Global Public Health at UNC Chapel Hill. Kate's professional work is focused on international public health. Kate is the author of 3 books, Reclaiming Rest, The Promise of Sabbath, Solitude, and Stillness in a Restless World, Their Faces Shown, a foster parent's lessons on loving and letting go, and Following the Red Bird, First Steps into a Life of Faith. In recognition of Rademacher's leadership in global health, she was selected for the inaugural cohort of Women Lift Health, which is sponsored by Stanford University. Monica Rivers is a licensed psychologist, talent maximizer, and people and culture champion. She is passionate about health and well-being and believes that her personal mission is to help others realize the fullness of their vocational calling. Over the course of her career, Monica has held leadership roles in healthcare and education and supported leaders at all levels across sectors and continents as an organization development consultant and executive coach. She holds a PhD in clinical psychology from Vanderbilt University. Welcome, both of you. I'm going to minimize myself now so we can focus on the authors and what they have to say, but I'll pop back up in a little over 30 minutes along with my co-moderator, Trinity Zan, and we'll take your questions at that point.
Great. Thank you so much, Maggie. Can you hear me, Monica? Great. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I wish we could be in person in the bookstore, although I see people calling in from all over the country. So this is the other benefit of being online. I just really want to thank everybody for your support. I've been saying it takes a village to launch a book, and it definitely does. I especially want to thank Dr. Monica Rivers for being here with me tonight. Monica and I met through the Women Lift program, which Maggie just mentioned briefly. So Women Lift is a leadership program that's been offered through Stanford with funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And Monica has been an incredible source of inspiration and support through that program. And so it's really special and meaningful to me to be here with you tonight, Monica, especially because part of our collaboration and work together has been about sort of showing up as your full self, showing up in your full self in your work and your life, including, and this book kind of brings those different parts of myself together, my faith life, my work life. And so again, it's really special to be here with you. So maybe I can hand it to you, Monica, and you could say a few words of welcome. And just for a brief kind of overview, we're going to have some discussion back and forth between Monica and me, and I'll do a couple of readings from the book. And then we're going to take some Q&A, and we need folks to enter the Q&A into the chat. So you can be entering them in, and my colleague and friend is going to be Trinity Zan, and Maggie are going to be moderating. So please enter in your questions as we go along. Yeah, so Monica, can I hand it to you?
Absolutely. Well, welcome all. It is truly a pleasure to be with you all this evening. As Kate mentioned, we're
getting feedback on your side, I think.
All right. Is that better?
I'm getting a double. Or can somebody put in the chat? Are you guys hearing double from Monica? Yeah, they're getting an echo. Poor Monica's having audio trouble.
Yikes.
Do you think is it the earbuds that you had plugged in? Now they're gone. Oh, and do you have your other browser open?
No. No, I don't. Can you, if you mute, can you mute? Oh, you are. Yikes.
You don't have two browsers open. This is why we need to get rid of the pandemic and all be back in person.
Right.
I'm going to jump in and see if maybe we can try to, if you could just hop out again, Monica, and we'll try to refresh the screen, and then maybe it will work again. So sorry about this. We'll try that.
Thank you.
So maybe while we're waiting for Monica to come back in, and I'm going to entice everyone to stick around because I know that everybody's zoomed out. I got a few. We are going to be doing a giveaway, and I hope Trinity's on. Trinity's going to manage the giveaway. So we have 2 copies of Reclaiming Rest to give away. So Trinity's going to pick 2 people at random. And then we have the amazing, and I think she's on, the amazing Suzanne Vinson, who's an artist, a local artist, and has been on part of the launch team for the book. And I partnered with her and commissioned with her to make 2 beautiful prints as part of the launch to celebrate the launch of Reclaiming Rest. And so this is one of them. Remember the Sabbath Day. Suzanne is an amazing, beautiful artist and spiritual leader. And so one of you lucky people will be chosen at random to get this, and I'll mail it to you. So we will have those goodies to give away. I actually don't see Trinity on, so I may need to commission another manager of the giveaway, but we'll see if she comes on. Maybe, yeah, we'll figure that out.
She's there. We'll bring her in later. She's online now.
Okay, cool.
Trinity is. So yeah, I'm just waiting for Monica to come back into the room. So we will continue with this. So Kate, I know that you and Monica had worked hard on preparing your questions and that sort of thing. But we do want Monica to be a part of this evening. So let's just hope that this will be resolved in a moment when she comes back on.
Okay, no worries. I see Christine's comment. Everyone's fine. They're resting. It's good. We actually were joking and just saying we should just all take a break and have some quiet time during this launch event.
I can also go ahead and ask the first question that Monica had for you, just so we can maybe start that going. If that
sounds great.
Okay, great. So, Kate, can you talk about how the book came to be and what prompted you to start exploring Sabbath keeping, and why did you decide to write a book about it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. We had some questions prepped, which, as Maggie said, so thank you, Maggie, for jumping in. So as many of you know, so I am going to do a reading. Thank you. I think I see Mia's suggestion. So I will do a reading in a second, but just as a bit of background. So I, as many of you know, work in international public health, and many wonderful colleagues are on the line. Thank you all so much for being here. And just in that sort of line of work, I see so many people from all walks of life who are just obviously, so many of us struggling with stress and overwhelm and kind of chronic, bordering on burnout. And as some of us know, and I kind of researched more as I was writing the book, kind of dramatically, the World Health Organization classified burnout as an occupational phenomenon for the first time in 2019. And that was before the pandemic. And of course, the pandemic in so many ways has just exacerbated the issue especially for working parents, for women. And so these issues are just, incredibly salient for many of us. And I got this book contract and started writing the book before the pandemic hit. So, again, it's been really sort of striking to be working on this project during a global pandemic when so many working parents, so many people, low-wage workers around the world are struggling. And then in addition, as many of you know, I have this kind of quirky and surprising faith journey that has been unfolding for a lot of my life, but has included kind of my unexpected conversion journey when I was in my early 30s. So I was baptized, as many of you know, when I was in my early 30s, became an Episcopalian, and my first book, Following the Red Bird, was published about 4 or 5 years ago, and that kind of talks about that journey. So one of the things that happened was when I actually was exposed to Sabbath keeping before I converted to Christianity, and then when I showed up as a new Christian, eager and shiny and bright, I was really disappointed that many people in the church today actually don't observe an intentional Sabbath practice. So that's kind of what led to my frustration and sadness. And maybe while we wait for Monica, I will do a reading. Does that sound good? I have a reading basically about sort of that surprise and disappointment in the lack of Sabbath keeping. So this is from chapter 4 and on page 33 for those of you who are following along at home. All right. When I became a Christian, I didn't think I was particularly naive. My eyes were wide open about the destructive ways that many Christians have wielded their religion over centuries and in many different contexts. And I knew the contemporary church was far from perfect. Despite this, I felt a nascent but blossoming relationship with God, and I was slowly getting to know Jesus. When I read Christian teachings, I was overwhelmed by their beauty and mystery, and I felt challenged by their radical invitation to self-emptying love. In contrast to Christians I read about in the news, the Christians I knew in person were generally kind, humble, and quietly faithful. Many were social justice warriors whose faith buoyed and strengthened their activism and service. Overall, my entry into the church felt like a profound and joyous homecoming. Once the honeymoon period faded, however, I knew enough to be prepared to experience disappointments in the church. But in the first year after my baptism, there hadn't been any scandals, insurmountable theological conundrums, or difficult congregational dynamics. Instead, my biggest surprise and sorrow was that I still felt alone in my Sabbath keeping. In addition to being lonely, I was confused. During the worship service each week, the congregation would kneel together in prayer and recite the Decalogue. "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy," the priest would announce. "Amen, Lord, have mercy," the congregation would respond in unison. I didn't understand. Didn't anyone else see the disconnect? It was clear from casual conversation that many parishioners were serious about maintaining a variety of dedicated spiritual disciplines. People casually referenced their daily prayer practice and regular Bible study. The Eucharist was revered, and I knew a number of people who met periodically with one of the priests for confession. As a parish, we were invited to adopt various liturgical practices, and people at church seemed to have gusto for all of this. But when it came to Sabbath keeping, the sentiment seemed different. At most, people seemed to think that Sabbath was synonymous with the hour-long worship service we attended on Sunday mornings. But I kept wondering, doesn't the Sabbath described in the Bible last longer than an hour or two? When we knelt together in prayer, hadn't we asked God for God's help to keep the entire day holy? In his best-selling book, Celebration of Discipline, author Richard Foster makes the case that rather than constraining or oppressing us, rigorous spiritual disciplines can bring us freedom. I agreed. As an earnest new convert who had grown up in an anything-goes religious culture, I didn't want to be on a pick-and-choose spiritual path anymore. Part of the attraction of a committed religious life is having a structured doctrine that forces us to bang up against the edges of what feels comfortable and easy. When it came to Sabbath keeping, I wanted the constraints that came with a prescribed, time-bound, weekly discipline, and I wanted to observe the practice in the context of community. Part of me felt silly for being so disappointed. What did it matter if other churchgoers included a day-long Sabbath observance in their spiritual repertoire? It wasn't as if people were saying cheerfully at coffee hour, "Well, I'm off to sleep with my friend's wife this afternoon." Still, didn't our communal prayer suggest that observing the Sabbath is just as much a commandment as the prohibition against adultery? Beyond my growing theological confusion about whether Sabbath keeping is an official Christian discipline, my disappointment was deeply personal. I was still struggling to find that elusive balance, the balance that I had been told for so long I ought to strive to achieve. I knew that compulsive work, especially when intertwined with a desire for external accolades, can quickly become pathological. Yet underfunctioning to obtain a calm, hassle-free lifestyle also seemed problematic. Given these challenges, I wanted my church to provide the tools and the framework so that finally, with God's help, I could hopefully move towards a balanced life. I had taken the plunge literally when I had been baptized. Now I wanted my church to live up to my expectations. So I'll pause there. Hopefully y'all are relaxing and I'm like reading you a bedtime story. Did Maggie, is Monica able to rejoin?
She seems to be having computer issues. It's not logging back in. So I will just continue to roll for now, if that is okay.
Poor Monica.
I know. Well, hope she joins us in just a little bit. So let me go back to the event. Hold on one second. Thank you for that. That was lovely. Okay. So you sometimes describe yourself as bivocational. Can you say more about that phrase and what it means to you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as I mentioned, I'm really have this busy career in public health. And again, I just really appreciate, I can see so many colleagues on the line, which means a lot to me. And I've just had this crazy side hustle of this writing, which for the most part, I've kind of kept under wraps. And I actually got that phrase bivocational from one of my priests at my church, Sarah Ball-Damberg. And it's actually a phrase that's often referred to clergy who have like a clergy job and then another job. And typically lay people don't use that phrase bivocational, but it really sang to my heart. And so, I really I'm part of, again, I'm sorry, Monica's having struggles with her program, but part of what I just have really loved about being a part of the Women Lift program is that it's sort of given me the confidence and the support to kind of be my full self and to sort of be more bold about being out in the world with these kind of multiple parts of myself. So that's kind of, that phrase bivocational does mean a lot to me for that reason. And, also I was just reading today a great author, some of you know his book, Austin Kleon, and he says, if you have more than, he's still like an artist. He says, if you have more than one passion, don't give any of them up. Let them talk to each other. And I thought that was really, really powerful. So. And you may be on mute, Maggie. I think you're on mute.
All right, thanks. So most people agree that rest is important for our health and wellness. In addition, you explore the theology of Sabbath keeping as revealing a different set of reasons for rest. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. And I talk a lot about this in the book. So for those of you who read it, I'm sure you took this as a main takeaway. I mean, I think as I was working on the book and just really exploring this issue in my own life, the why of rest is I think just as important as the how of rest and the when of rest. I think we jump really quickly to the sort of how do I do it? When do I do it? But I think we really need to be thinking about the why. And because for me, the theology of Sabbath keeping really gets at why do we work and why do we rest? And as many of you know, my mom is on the line and she says she's happy to always be my foil. So my mom is a social justice activist and really an incredible role model in many ways. And at the same time, I grew up in a pretty secular kind of humanist background. And so I think when you're working from that perspective, you are really, we have sort of only ourselves to rely on to solve the world's problems. And so the reason we rest is we're kind of, we're recharging our battery. Like we have to recharge ourselves and get back on the horse, so to speak. And the theology of Sabbath really offers a different kind of worldview, and that includes that that we're not little gods, that we have that we need to connect to God, and that we need to be we need to participate in God's healing power and grace. And so actually Sabbath keeping for me is both a profound call to humility. Again, that sort of idea that we're not little gods. And also it's a time to reconnect to that sense of grace and connection with the Holy Spirit. And so for me, this is part of why I call the Sabbath kind of the vehicle for my ongoing conversion. It's just such a journey. Like I'm just tempted again and again just to rely on myself, to again rely on all of our efforts to save ourselves from the messes we're in. And I think the Sabbath offers an opportunity to think and to be challenged week after week to return to potentially a different worldview. So that's what I'll say about that.
That's beautifully stated. So You mentioned about your mother's social justice work, and that's one thing that you explore a lot in the book. Can you expand on that a little bit more beyond what you were just saying?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of, I wrote this book, again, it was for those of you who've been walking with me in this journey, many of you have, I'm working full time. I have this wonderful opportunity to write this book with Flyleaf Books, having no idea that we were about to enter a global pandemic. And in addition, of course, to the pandemic, we've been in what some call a double pandemic, where we've been concurrently facing the impact of violent white supremacy and systemic racism, and sort of having kind of a long overdue sort of national and global wake-up call around that. So I think sort of like many people, that really caused me to think more deeply about my own complicity and white privilege. And so that's kind of, I mean, I was already thinking about Sabbath as a social justice issue, but I think the events of the last year and a half really helped me and pushed me to go deeper with that. I mean, I think at the most fundamental level, we need to be asking ourselves who can afford to rest and who has the right to rest. And certainly, I think just at its most basic level, it's like who financially can afford to rest, right? A lot of people are concerned about Sabbath keeping as potentially being elitist and being out of reach for low-income workers. And in fact, I mean, that is certainly an issue that we need to be talking about. But really, actually, the Sabbath is a profound call to equity. In Exodus, part of the whole sort of theology of Sabbath that's laid out in the Old Testament is that all have the chance to rest, whether it's human or animal, servant, man or woman. I mean, it's just, it's sort of Sabbath is supposed to be for everyone. And so when some people in our society, a lot of people in our society can't afford a day off a week, we know that something's profoundly wrong in our society. So that's kind of, the sort of most obvious thing. And it's not just, I think when we think about minimum wage, it's not just sort of a healthcare and housing issue, which is what we often think about. It's time, right? There was a Washington Post article where it was saying, when I think about making $15 an hour, the thing I think most of is the time that could buy with my son. So, I mean, I just think, again, money, as we think about the equitable wage discussion that's happening right now, we need to be thinking about time for family. So, but I think at even more of a more profound level, there's a sort of like, who has the right to rest? And I'm going to read you guys one more passage from the book. And I opened this book by talking about how Breonna Taylor, who of course was murdered, as well as Ahmaud Arbery, how Breonna was sleeping when she was killed and Aubrey was running for exercise. So I'll read to you from that passage. This is from chapter 15. So it's Becoming Bilingual, Fluency in the Language of Faith. The violent deaths of Black Americans, including George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor in the spring of 2020 illuminated the painful truth that reclaiming rest is a privilege that many have been systematically denied. Arbery was jogging when he was chased down and shot to death by white men in Georgia. Taylor was sleeping when police officers entered her apartment without warning just after midnight because they suspected two men of storing drugs there. In a column from the New York Times, Wesley Morris asks why white Americans still won't allow Black people to, quote, run for leisure and sleep for rest. As the death count continued to grow, both because of the virus and because of the violence in the streets, I was haunted by the questions. Would God really show up to redeem the world? If so, how and when? 10 days after George Floyd's death, my family and I went to a protest in Chapel Hill organized by the local NAACP. The main street in town had been closed to traffic, and the crowd filled both lanes. At the beginning of the march, the group knelt in silence for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to commemorate the time that the white police officer in Minneapolis pinned Floyd under his knee while Floyd pleaded for mercy, telling the officer over and over, "I can't breathe." As we knelt silently on the hot pavement, I realized how long 8 minutes and 46 seconds really is. Bent there, I tried to pray, but I couldn't. My mind was racing. All I could do was repeat over and over, oh God," in my mind. As we stood back up, the chants resumed. Now, what do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now. As we gathered in front of the courthouse, one of our state representatives, a Black woman, stood up to speak. I'm one of the few elected officials who grew up in Chapel Hill and is old enough to remember segregation, she said. I remember the businesses that refused to serve us. For more than 60 years, she said, the song "We Shall Overcome" has soared over the streets of the community. And for all that time, groups like ours had been demanding justice. Yet the progress she had seen in her lifetime had been incremental and inadequate. We needed to do better. I agreed. I just wasn't sure how. St. Augustine famously told us that we will never find peace until we rest in God. The thousands of protesters who took to the streets chanted that there will be no peace until there is justice. It left me wondering, how do these two visions sync? So I'm going to pause there. If you want to know my answer to that question, you can buy the book. Or perhaps you'll be one of the winners of the free 2 copies we're going to give away tonight. I think that sort of a little bit ended with the question, but I think, again, that really sort of captures the heart for me of why do we work and why do we rest? Who do we rely on? Can we really rely on God? And if so, how? And again, these are the questions that sort of the theology of Sabbath keeping helps me wrestle with.
That was great. You write beautifully. Thank you. Very thoughtful. So in addition to exploring the why of rest, you write about the how and when of Sabbath keeping. How does your personal Sabbath practice look now, and what suggestions do you have for others?
Yeah, so my daughter, I think, who may be on the line, and my husband, David, I think are rolling their eyes because it literally took researching and writing a whole book about rest for me to finally get better about resting on a more regular basis. So I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of not. Really, this book helped me because I think what I was looking for, what the Sabbath does for me is gives me permission. I think, like many, I have colleagues who are online every night, all through the weekend, and I need permission and help to know how to set boundaries around that. And that's why I think I'm hungry for the Sabbath, is because it's that sort of theological. It's not just, it's a gift from God and it's a mandate from God. So leaning into that. So I have a weekly Sabbath practice. And I think just taking a step back as we think about reclaiming rest, I think we need to sort of think about a daily cadence, a weekly cadence, and then sort of a monthly, quarterly, kind of annual cadence, and a lifelong cadence. I think I've also been having really sort of beautiful conversations about the meaning of rest in retirement, kind of like when you feel like your sort of main vocational work in life is kind of concluded. And so kind of what rest means in that context as well. So I would say that, one of the things, I have a quick start guide to Sabbath keeping at the back of the book. My dear friend, Kathy Izzard, who was really an inspiration while I was working on this book, told me I needed a more of a quick start guide. So I added that in the back. And one of the first things I say is to really reflect on what counts as work for you. If you are a stay-at-home mom, if you are retired, if you're unemployed, if you're a student, if you are a full-time worker, your kind of work is going to look different. Work and rest are different at different seasons in our lives. So I think once we get clear about what counts as work for us, then we can abstain from that work. And likewise, if, for example, if you're doing physical labor for your day job or for your work, you probably want to rest from that. If you're not doing physical labor, you're doing computer work all the time, you want to rest from that. And perhaps, being physical and in your body is restful. So, I think that's, a place to start. And then again, for me, my daily cadence is part of that is my daily prayer practice, the weekly Sabbath keeping. And then a big chunk of the book, for those of you who've read it, is sort of taking intentional retreats and time away.
It's so apt and fitting right now when we have such job life creep, when everything is so combined and we've all been home and, we're starting to come out of that, but we're just trying to find that balance. And yes, how we use those tools and find that time to draw those boundaries and create that space. It's very key in our world for everyone right now. So finally, you write about how we need to build back better after the pandemic. How does rest fit into that version?
Yeah, so I love that phrase, build back better. And I think it's really becoming ubiquitous now, but it wasn't, I think, as much as at the beginning of the pandemic. It really is a phrase that comes out of the humanitarian sector and building back better after humanitarian crises. And so, I think I see many of you in the chat who I've just had such deep and soulful conversations about this. I think the pandemic and, as you're saying, Maggie, just the felt reality of so many of us, the stress that this kind of struggle we have of figuring out how to do this. And it's all levels. Part of my Women Lift project is I've been able to interview people of kind of like in outside of the US, within the US, people who are much more senior than I am. And there's just this kind of overwhelming sense of confusion about this issue of how do we have what I like to call work-rest balance. I think even the phrase work-life balance is a little bit problematic, as I talk about in the book. But I think we do need to build back better when it comes to rest. And, part of that, as I was saying earlier, is a justice issue. We have to make sure that everyone has the right to rest, and that we need to fight for that. And part of that is we have a history of that. There's part of the history in the United States is around Sabbath-informed social justice ethic, including like our labor laws. So I think we can be reminding of that. And as I was just talking about somebody, we're not reinventing the wheel here. This is like an ancient practice. And I think, again, there's a long discussion about the book about why people are sort of allergic to Sabbath keeping now. And part of it is the legalism of sort of our puritanical history. But I do think that as we build back better, we can be redefining some of these things for ourselves. What does Sabbath mean? What does holy rest mean? What does holy leisure look like? And again, how can we be engaged in those activities, not just for self-care? Of course, self-care is important, but also as a way to connect with our deeper selves, to have time for stillness, to have time for prayer, to have time for reflection. So again, it's just, my poor family has had to put up with me, but it's really been a rich exploration of this topic. So I'm very grateful.
That is the questions that I have that you have prepared. And I'm afraid Monica does not seem to be able to come back in, which is extremely disappointing. But right now I'm going to try to bring in Trinity, who is another moderator for the evening. So I'm inviting her to join us on screen. And so we'll see if she's able to come, and then you can do a little bit more with your presentation that you had hoped to be able to do today.
Well, and Trinity only got this job yesterday, so she's a champ for she's a champ for being willing to do it.
Great. Well, we'll see if she's accepting on. And so I have one question that I can start. I go ahead and ask you while we're waiting for her to come on screen. It was posted in the Ask a Question. So she said, Kate, I'd love to hear more about how you're thinking through your Sabbath keeping practice for when the world opens back up. As expectations for work travel and social invitations emerge again, what's top of mind for you? Any alterations for Sabbath keeping?
That's a great question. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. No, I think it's, I see my dear friend from college, Mia, on the line. I was just texting her before the call. Like, I have 2 now potential trips to Seattle in October. And suddenly, like, this reality is hitting me, like the travel is going to come back. So I think it is really important. And I mean, again, I hope one of the things that has been a blessing for me in writing this book is that I feel more of a sense of community around Sabbath keeping. And I have, as you all know, have felt alone in this. I'm grateful for my Sabbath buddy. I call her Carol McGuire, to whom the book is co-dedicated. But I do feel a lot more sort of community and accountability. And I think part of that, one of the things I love, Monica says, I'm sorry again for her IT issues, but she says, this is not a one and done. Like, this is not a thing where we nail it once and then we are like done with it. So I think having that accountability and that intentionality is going to be key. So I think really, again, being part of building back better is taking the time to think about what is our intention? What is our intention for re-emerging? So I think the other thing is, as a lot of you know, I have thought a lot about the when of Sabbath keeping, and actually having the practice of Sabbath keeping on Saturdays has really been like a game changer for my family. It works for my daughter, Lila. It works better with our family's overall cadence. And actually, one of the things that's been really interesting in writing the book was writing and learning about the theology of Holy Saturday. So for those of you who part of the Christian faith, or of course, are interested in it. Of course, we think a lot about Good Friday and we think a lot about Easter, but we don't spend a lot of time thinking about what happens on Holy Saturday. And so I think that whole, a lot of the Christian church talks about Sunday, the Lord's Day, as a little Easter, so that you're kind of celebrating the resurrection every week. And so, but I was reading in my research about Coptic Christianity when they celebrated both the Sabbath and the Lord's Day. And so that's part of my now rhythm, is that I observe the Sabbath on Saturdays, and then I celebrate Sunday as that kind of, I worship on Sunday mornings and the resurrection. And then I begin my work week kind of with a writer, I'm forgetting her name, what she calls a resurrection mindset. So I'm really hopeful, back to the question that the person answered, is that I'm not only hopeful, I am committed to maintaining that discipline and rigor in rest, because it truly, truly makes a difference for me. When I really cut off from work for 24 hours a week, I feel different. So.
I mean, we certainly witnessed that with vacation, right? I mean, we whenever we can actually get away and sort of cut off, and that it definitely improves our work. So committing to that is a great way of refreshing and resurrecting. There's two more questions in the ask a question that I'm going to read. Perhaps the underlying question there is, won't you feel FOMO declining invitations?
Won't I feel FOMO? That's funny. Well, I just did an interview yesterday and they were asking about FOMO, about the book. So I think that's like funny. I haven't. I'll tell you what I said to that person about the issue of FOMO. I mean, I think for those of you who read the book, that I sort of open it with this painful moment of admitting to myself my own competitiveness. And so I think that, FOMO is natural in a lot of ways. Like, we compare ourselves to each other. We're competitive. At least I am. And that's, for me, something that I'm not proud of, that's uncomfortable. And so I, again, really see that that's a wake-up call to part of reclaiming rest too, is slowing down and having greater compassion for others. I mean, of course, a huge part of the spiritual path is loving one's neighbor as oneself. And so I think, that is part of the call too, is that sort of I know we joke around about FOMO, but, the sort of like root of it of comparing ourselves to others, and that sort of competitiveness, and that's something that we need to, also kind of have the spiritual antidotes to, which is compassion and love. So as many of you know, I'm married to a Buddhist. So we have lots of discussions about compassion and love. And I'll just give while I'm on David. So my husband, David's on the line, and just a huge thanks to him, both for his support and putting up with me, but also being really a spiritual and kind of theological inspiration. David just, really his devotion and kind of thoughtfulness and intelligence and integrity have really shaped me. So I'm grateful to you, David. So he's taught me, he's pushed me to have, as Lila would sing, compassion. So
that's great. There's a few more questions. I will keep on going through some of them. So could you talk about the role of having a Sabbath buddy in developing and sustaining your Sabbath practice?
Yeah, so that really is helpful. And for those of you who use who work at FHI, that I'll just say, having a buddy is evidence-based. Having a buddy to share in whatever kind of behavior change, is a public health kind of, that's evidence-based for sure. So, but it's also, peer support. Thanks, Christine. So, I mean, having that, again, sort of support and accountability. And I think that can take different shapes. For me, it was having one person where we, for a while, would meet about once a month. Now we just kind of meet on an ad hoc basis. And we really, again, I just didn't have many friends at all who had an intention around Sabbath keeping. And so just having somebody else who was like into it and talking about the challenges, talking about what we loved about it, what we hate, what we struggled with, was really helpful to me. And so, but it might be a book group. It might be, I'll also say that I have a group of, we call ourselves the FRA Leagues. So it's friends plus colleagues. And that's really been also a time of support and accountability. And so I think these like peer support groups are really important. And if your religious community supports kind of a rhythm of rest and supports, kind of intentional rest keeping, then you may not need that, maybe sort of part of your, may already be part of your community. But if you feel like you need that, including sort of, again, more accountability, support, encouragement, I think, it really was helpful to me.
All right, more questions keep coming in. So, hello, Kate. This is from Sophronio Scott.
Oh,
you use the word fight when it comes to making time to Sabbath. I think we fight for what is important, but mainly what also seems important to others, family, social justice, etc. But we think of rest for ourselves as frivolous. How do we change our thinking so we can put rest on the level of that importance, so we know rest is something worth fighting for?
So I'm having distraction because Sophronia Scott is a beautiful, beautiful author, and I'm having a fangirl moment. So she wrote a beautiful book about Thomas Merton that was also just published by Broadleaf. So we both have been working with the publisher Broadleaf. So I encourage you to check out her book. I think it's called The Monk and the Seeker. Am I right, Sophronia? Can you put it in the chat? It really enjoyed it. So, and also, Sophronia, you caught me because I was trying to actually avoid the word fight. So actually, Maggie, can you repeat the question? I need to reabsorb it. I was trying to intentionally avoid the word fight when I was talking about like we have to fight for justice, but it slipped in. So can you repeat the question?
You use the word fight when it comes to making time to Sabbath. I think we fight for what is important, but mainly what also seems important to others, family, social justice, etc. But we think of rest for ourselves as frivolous. How do we change our thinking so we can put rest on the level of that importance, so we know rest is worth fighting for?
Okay, gotcha. Thank you for repeating it. Yeah, I mean, I think I think that there's, again, sort of the sort of mainstream sort of self-care answer about this, which is sort of like, if mama's not happy, nobody's happy, like put your oxygen mask on first. So I think certainly from sort of a health and wellness perspective, rest is not frivolous. I mean, the evidence is unequivocal. Again, as a public health person, I can say that. I mean, there's just research out recently from the WHO a couple weeks ago that there's now evidence that shows what we've always known, which is that overwork, if you're working more than 50 hours a week, you have a substantially higher risk of stroke and heart disease. So rest is not frivolous, and we have to know that for ourselves, just like we know that for others. And this, I think, has to become a public health issue. So for those of us who are on the phone who work in public health, the World Health Organization is acknowledging it. So I think as we think about, maternal and child health, global health, all of this stuff, this is an important issue. Now, from a spiritual perspective, again, this is, the opposite of frivolous, right? The Sabbath is a mandate and a gift from God. Like, what is more beautiful and magnificent from that? And for me, I think, again, when I really became first exposed to Sabbath keeping, the idea that creation is not complete until the Sabbath was made, right? So in Genesis, God's making the world, but the creation was not finished until God created the Sabbath. And so this idea that rest, holy rest, is a part of creation. It is part of the DNA of our existence. And so to reclaim it is to reclaim what is ours. What is ours, it's our birthright, literally. And so, yeah, it's a gift. We're like, thanks be to God. So.
All right, if anyone has any other questions, just put them in Ask a Question. Otherwise, I have one last one here. Can you talk more about how David's faith practice has inspired or not your interest in the Sabbath and rest?
Yes, David is, I wish he's in the other room. I should bring him in here because he's also so cute. So I think, again, David and I have a lot of really rich conversations. And for those of you who don't know, David he's been a really serious Buddhist practitioner, scholar, and teacher for many years. I would say, and again, I'm sorry he can't speak for himself, I don't think that there's really an equivalent of Sabbath in Buddhism. I actually was asked that question recently. So I think what we have is a lot more, sort of, oh, I hear something. Maybe he's coming.
Fancy t-shirt on and everything.
He's got his fancy t-shirt. So here, David, do you want to come and be part of that? Okay. So here's David, the Buddhist husband. And now you've distracted me. So I was going to say, I don't think that there's sort of a Sabbath equivalent, but there is a whole chapter about mindfulness. And that is really a chapter where I sort of am in dialogue with David about like, what is mindfulness? Of course, mindfulness is like a huge thing in our culture. It's, there's mindfulness classes in hospitals and prisons and workplaces. And so I think both David and I, you can chime in if you disagree, think that the sort of secular version of mindfulness is often kind of a distortion. Is that a good way of putting it? So, really kind of thinking about what is mindfulness, the subtitle of the book is Sabbath, solitude, and stillness. So it's, it's primarily an exploration of Sabbath keeping, but it's also an exploration of sort of stillness. And part of that, again, people jump immediately to mindfulness. And so from a Christian Buddhist tag team, we can, start to challenge some of the more kind of secular versions of Sabbath keeping. Of mindfulness. Do you want to add anything?
I think like mindfulness is to real Buddhism as self-care is to Sabbath.
It's like, you need a more rich exploration of it. Yeah. All right. So I see Maggie maybe inching us. Can you sit here so you're not like, what? Sit here. You want to be on screen with me?
No, it's all right.
Oh, okay. Oh, and there's Sonia's beautiful artwork in the back, Sonia. Okay, Maggie, are we needing to wrap up?
Sure, and I'm afraid Trinity wasn't able to get on either, so I can help with the giveaway if there's anything that I can do, or you can sort of run it as you would like.
So I did this once before, and what I just did was I closed my eyes and pointed and like scrolled and just pointed at random. So why don't I do that, and then I can just hopefully not pick my family. Does that sound good?
You mean to the right? Okay, so you got to point in the other direction.
Oh,
you mean
okay,
and
I'll just do it like this, and then I'll stop. Okay. I have Suzanne. Suzanne, who's actually, that's perfect because Suzanne is the artist of this, so we can trade. So Suzanne, you are the winner of another, let's see, maybe you've already had one, but you get another copy of Reclaiming Rest. And then that's perfect because I was wanting to give away one of these prints. So I'm going to do that again. Okay, I'm not cheating you all. All right. Liz Dowling Sender. Oh, and that's perfect because I would like to give a shout out of appreciation to Liz is my spiritual director and has like literally just walked with me every step of this amazing journey from day one. So thank you, Liz. And Liz, you get a Remember the Sabbath Day made by Suzanne Vincent, beautiful artist. So so there you go. Giveaway. Thank you all. Thank you all for sticking with it too. I know everybody is so zoomed out and I'm just feeling the love through the chat and I'm just really grateful. It's, I just love seeing everybody's names and just really so many of you have supported me in this journey. So I just want to say a huge thank you.
Well, thank you for being so calm and full of grace and patient with our technical difficulties as well this evening. I have one little question from our side that I'd like to ask you. What are you writing or working on right now? And also, what are you reading at the moment?
Oh, good question. Well, what I'm reading is, and I'm actually not sure if Brian Elaine is on the phone, but Brian Elaine has curated an amazing book called How to Heal Our Divides. And I'm reading that right now. Sorry, did I lose you? Yeah, okay. So Brian, if you're on, I want to give you a shout out and thanks. So he's curated a beautiful book called, again, How to Heal Our Divides, just really about sort of, again, just thinking about social justice issues. And he's curated, a beautiful compendium of activists and spiritual leaders to help us think about, Yes, How to Heal Our Brides. Thanks, Sophronia. So yeah, I encourage you to check that out. It's a great book. And I'm thinking about my next writing project. I just really love writing. And so I do have kind of a next project percolating in my heart. And it's sort of still nascent and taking shape, but I think, again, as here he is again, the surprise guest. Buddhists talk and think a lot about suffering, and so I think it's interesting for us to sort of have interfaith dialogues about sort of Buddhist perspectives on suffering and Christian perspectives on suffering. So I think that part of the next writing project will be touching on that. So yeah, if David's up for it. As my dad put in the chat, David's the sort of unsung hero of all three of my books. So certainly for putting up with me, for sure.
He sounds like a wonderful partner. Well, we're about to close the event, so I'd like to end with a few reminders. If you'd like to purchase a copy of Kate's books, you can find them on our website. You can click the green button below our faces. And if you missed some of our conversation tonight, or if you'd like to share it with a friend, it's recorded on the Crowdcast website, so you can share the link with your friends or go back and watch it again. And finally, keep an eye out for other upcoming events in our weekly newsletter and on our website. We've got some great programs coming up online, and we've just begun this week some in-person hybrid events. So you can book a seat ahead of time in our intimate small venue space that we're in right now. We have some chairs set up, so we're trying to kind of get back in person as we're all feeling more comfortable with that. So thank you so much to Kate and to Monica and Trinity, and I'm sorry that we weren't able to get you on screen as well, but maybe next time. So thanks for coming, and thank you so much for supporting Flyleaf and Kate Rademacher.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. And I hope everybody has blessings in your work and in your rest. So thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.